Good evening, everyone. I'll wait for a few comments to pop up so I know that people are seeing and hearing me, and then we'll get started. Anybody out there, please? Oh, hello. Hello, Ken, Duncan. Hello, Duncan. Gosh, haven't you got something better to do than listen to me, Duncan? Richard, hi. Okay, just give it another minute or two till we got a few people on here. That's okay, Duncan, don't worry. It seems the format the format of this thing at this end is different to when I tested it the other day, and I don't have a picture of myself on here, which is a bit perturbing. But I guess you must be able to see me. I need to show you one or two photos. Okay, well we'll get going at 2 minutes past. Any more out there? Gonna say hello? One of you tell me if the sound is okay, actually, please, because we had some issues with the sound the other day. Um, I'm shouting as well as I can for the last half an hour. Somebody give me a thumbs up on the sound. Okay, folks, I think I'll get started anyway. I'm assuming that you can all hear me. So, good evening. Welcome to this week's session of Imray Live. I'm one of the two authors of Imray's East Coast Pilot, along with Garth Cooper. I think you may be seeing Garth in the next week or two on one of these sessions, talking about something a little different. Um, I'm going to be talking today about East Coast Pilot. The latest edition is the fifth edition. Hope you can see that. Those of you who are not familiar with this book, it's the one with the aerial picture on the front. It's the first edition of East Coast Pilot that has an aerial picture. Just a few words of explanation about myself. I live on the North Kent coast. I've been sailing for a heck of a long time, since I was 12 actually. I think I did about 40 years of dinghy racing, and then got involved in cruising about 20 odd years ago. I want to spend some time explaining how East Coast Pilot was set up in the beginning, how it all came about, and why, from my point of view, it's mostly John Goode's fault. Who the heck's John Goode, you might be saying? I'm sure a lot of you do know him. Um, John Goode was the boss of a sailing school called Southern Sailing down on the Solent in the 1990s, when I did a coastal skipper practical course with them. I didn't actually meet John on the course, but I had to go to his house afterwards to drop something back to him on behalf of the instructor on my way home. So that was when I first met him. That was nothing to do with this though. Um, Having done that practical course, we bought our first little cruiser in the late 90s, which was a Hunter Horizon 26, a smashing little boat. Step up from a dinghy with a heads and a cabin and a couple of bunks. And we had a lot of fun with that, sailing first of all in the Swale where we're based, and then I've gradually ventured further afield across the estuary, and I think I learned in a hurry that doing a practical skipper course and exam in the Solent with a boatload of beefy blokes was very different to having your own little boat out in the middle of nowhere with just your wife as crew, who hasn't got nearly as much sailing experience as you have. And so I had to do a lot of learning in a hurry. And I made some pretty daft mistakes during that time as well, but I came to fall in love with this wonderful cruising ground on the East Coast and got generally interested in bigger boat sailing. So I started to read a new magazine that had come out around that time called Sailing Today, a very different version of Sailing Today to the one you see around on the bookshelves these days. It was a very practical sort of magazine. It was a very fresh look at what we do compared with the old established magazines, and I really quite liked it. So in around 1999, year 2000, we went to a Southampton boat show, and wandering around I happened to notice the Sailing Today stand, and on the stand, not talking to anybody at that moment, was John Goode, who at that time was the editor of the magazine. I think he was the second editor it had, and he was editor for really quite a few years. Anyway, I went over to him and had a natter, and he looked at me and he said, well, what do you think of the magazine? What could we do better? So I said to him, well, you've got this great local news section, several pages long, obviously written by different people, and there's never anything about the area where I sailed, all around the Kent coast, the southeast of England generally. And he looked at me and sucked his pipe, as he does, and he said, well, would you like to write it? This was one of those oh heck moments, but I thought, well, I'd retired early a few years before, and I thought, well, I could do that. And there was a little bit of pocket money in it as well, so I had a go at it for a couple of months, and he said, well, that's all right. So I carried on doing that for several years. It was quite a nice little job that took a couple of days a month, getting some stories, taking photographs, writing it up and sending it in. Now, the person I sent it into was a chap called Colin Jarman, who at that time was the news editor of the magazine. And I will tell you that the first few sets of copy I sent in, he completely shredded. He rewrote it completely. He used my photographs, but I didn't recognise many of my words. So I had a learning curve there, gradually getting to understand what he wanted me to write. And eventually I was sending stuff in that pretty much appeared in the magazine as I'd written it. So that trudged along until early 2004. And out of the blue one day, I had a phone call from Colin Jarman, who I might add, I'd never met him. I talked to him a couple of times on the phone, but most of the communication was simply by email. And he had a bit of a surprising thing to say to me. He explained he had the idea for a new pilot book for the East Coast where he lived, and but he couldn't see how he could possibly write it all himself in anything less than 2 or 3 years, and he wanted to get it done more quickly. He'd sold the idea to a publisher, which was Imray's, and he was asking me and Garth Cooper, who was another local news contributor on the magazine, if we would share the writing with him and become co-authors with him. So this was another oh heck moment, and I did agree tentatively to meet him and Garth in a pub on the quay at Malden a couple of weeks later and talk it over. So I set off to this meeting, not really knowing what to expect, and met the two of them for the first time. And Colin set out his ideas about this new book. He was very keen that it should be a book that could be used in the cockpit, where the skipper could perhaps go up a strange river or creek where he'd never been before, tiller between his knees, the book open in front of him, and the book would describe what it was like to go into this place, and it would describe the features in the order in which the new skipper would see them coming up with photographs to match. And it would purely be a pilot book. It wouldn't be full of local history. It wouldn't be full of information about local pubs and restaurants and which was the best dish on the menu in that cafe, because he felt all that stuff just didn't belong in a book like that. So after 2 hours, I suddenly found myself agreeing to have a go at writing this thing. Well, not have a go at it, I committed to it. I committed to write a third of it, which was basically the section I was familiar with, the bottom half of a patch stretching from Lowestoft right down to Ramsgate and up to London as well, and up to the heads of all the rivers and creeks along the way. And so, oh heck, I left the pub that day thinking, well, what have I got myself into? And I sat in the car on the way home from Malden, 2-hour drive, and by the time I got home I convinced myself, well, this is easy. I don't think it's really a problem. I know all these places pretty well, except I'd never been up the Thames to Tower Bridge, and I'd never been across to the Canvey area, but everywhere else I'd been, and I was fairly familiar with. Now I'd actually, between us, we'd bought a new boat a couple of months before this, a Moody S31 that was our third boat, and we'd already agreed to go on a trip to Holland in company with 2 or 3 other club members in their boats. And I thought, well, should I ditch this Holland cruise? And I thought, no, I'll manage it all right. So off we went to Holland for several weeks, came back and carried on cruising around our area here, gathering all the information. Late in the season I went up the Thames with a friend of mine in his Fisher 30. I had to catch a lift with somebody with a motorboat to do the upper Medway above the fixed bridges at Rochester. But apart from that, we did everything else in our Moody, went everywhere that was required in this book, including an interesting trip round to Canvey, which isn't so very far from the Swale at all, but we just happened not to have been there. I can remember our first night on the slipway at Benfleet Yacht Club, a super club full of very nice people, very helpful, and still a heck of a nice place to visit now. And so we did all that, and then sort of nothing much happened for a while. I thought about putting pen to paper, starting typing, but somehow nothing happened. And then around the end of September, the phone rang again one day, and it was Colin, and he said, well, how are you getting on with the writing, Dick? And I said, well, I've thought about it, but I haven't actually started. And he said, well, you really need to get on with it, because Imrays want all the copy by Christmas so they can publish this book in the spring. Oh, I said, so have you and Garth started then? Have you written some of it? And well, no, it turned out they hadn't started either. So I retreated to my office, this scruffy room you can see I'm sitting in here, and locked myself in it for several weeks, and produced the first chapter, which I remember was the Medway chapter, and sent it off to Colin, quite pleased with myself. And after a couple of days it came back from Colin. Now Colin had this method of editing on Microsoft Word where he used strike through if he didn't like stuff, and he changed text to red if he reworded something, or he wanted you to reword it, or something was wrong. And to my horror, nearly all the text in this chapter was red. and I was appalled actually, and I wandered off downstairs to get a cup of coffee and told my wife what had happened and said to her, I don't think I can do this really. And I expect she patted me on the head and sent me back upstairs to have another look. And I read through what Colin had done, and I thought, well, he's probably right, I suppose. I could rewrite this, and yes, that bit of information I didn't get quite right. And so I rewrote it and sent it off, and it came back with less red in it. And I gradually learned the hang of how he wanted this book to look. I should add that I discovered about halfway through all this that he actually had all the charts out on his dining room table, was checking in minute detail all the pilotage information that we were writing, all the bearings, distances, everything. And I didn't appreciate that. I thought he was just reading it, but no, he was checking everything. And so he was doing this for Garth too, and after a few weeks he said, I'm going to send you some of my chapters. So Colin sent a couple of his own chapters, and I found to my delight I could do exactly the same thing to him. Shred them, find things he'd done wrong, send it back with loads of red text. And he made a comment at one stage which went along the lines of, I've never ever worked with somebody who's done this to me before. But around this time I christened him the proofreader from hell, because whatever I sent to him he would find something wrong or something that could be worded better, bless him. He was a very clever chap, and if I'm good at proofreading now it's because I learnt it from him. So we eventually got it written. Colin slammed it all together, Colin edited all the photographs, and it all went off to Imray's before Christmas 2004. After Christmas I got on with creating a website, because we decided the book was very much to be one supported in the internet age, where publishers neat and slammed together all the amendments. We could do that ourselves and publish them on our own website. And the finger got pointed at me for this because my career job had been in IT, even though I'd never had anything much to do with websites, I might add. So the book got published in the spring, and the rest, they say, is history really. We had some nice sessions at Imray's just before it went off for printing to put the finishing touches to it all. And heck of a nice crowd of people at Imray's up in St Ives, I might add. They occupy what I guess is a couple of old houses pushed together. Lovely people, and their products are really so good. It's amazing what comes out of that building, quite extraordinary. Now you might wonder how much work that all was, and I've got some numbers here. So I originally wrote the chapters for the Canby area, Thames, Medway, Swale, North Kent Coast, Ramsgate, and the last chapter, which is about crossing the estuary. And so it took a whole summer. I did 500 miles in my boat. I did 400 miles by road. You might wonder why, but a lot of that was having to go back to places I'd visited by boat because I didn't ask all the right questions, I realised when I came to write it. 1,500 photographs and 6 weeks of writing and checking with the other two. And that was about 26,000 words, or a third of the book. Bear in mind, I'd been an IT professional. I'd never done anything like this ever before, but somehow I sort of fell into it. So what happened next? Well, later editions came along. After 3 years, to our astonishment, the book had sold out, and so we had to write another one. Now you might think that writing a second edition or a third edition or a fourth edition is easy because you've got the book there, you just make a few changes in it. But it's not quite as easy as all that. I thought it was going to be easy, but I quickly realised that actually you still have to go everywhere all over again, check all the details because so many really tiny items have changed, apart from obvious ones like buoys being moved or buildings disappearing or marinas being built or whatever. And the second, I can't tell you how long the second edition took. I've got some stats for the fourth edition. And the fourth edition was a little bit different for me because by that time, sadly, Colin wasn't very well at all, and I did a lot of his part of the book for him. So I got involved in writing 4 other chapters as well as my own. But again, it took an entire summer, 800 miles in a boat, 500 miles by road again, 2,600 photographs, 2,600 photographs, of which we used 200. 6 weeks again of writing, and it's amazing that you can write a chapter for one edition, and when you come to reword it for another edition, you think I could have worded that so much better, so you end up rewriting half of it anyway, even if not much in that chunk of text has really changed. And that effort on my part was 48,000 words, about 2/3 of the book. So that was the fourth edition, which came out a few years ago. I should add at this stage that there were other things going on around here. That the fourth edition was extended up to Great Yarmouth, and incidentally, Imray's made a huge howler on the spine of the fourth edition. The book was extended up to Great Yarmouth at the request of many readers because Great Yarmouth is an ideal entry point into the Broads, so we had an extra chapter to do. And the subtitle of the book changed to Ramsgate to Great Yarmouth to Ramsgate. And we do check all our own content rigorously, as I'm sure you know and understand, as I've described how we do it. But we didn't have anything to do with the cover apart from supply photographs for it. And when the cover was made up, the spine said Great Yarmoo. They missed the T out of Yarmouth. And nobody actually noticed this for about a month after it had been published. And then suddenly lots of people started noticing. So there was a lot of hilarity, and Imray never owned up to say who it was who'd done it. One of the other big changes around the fourth edition, or perhaps during the third, was that we were able to publish charts of the Deben and Orr entrances, actually from the Trinity House surveys. This is quite unusual. When Trinity House do a survey, they generally simply send the data to the UK Hydrographic Office, and it's eventually published in charts, either by the UKHO or by Imrays themselves. But these charts for the river entrances here, I'm sure you're all aware that those river entrances change dramatically sometimes every year. And Imrays and Trinity House came to an agreement where Trinity House would give Imrays the data almost straight away. Imrays produced a little chart we call Chartlet, and we were able to publish those chartlets on our website. This all come slightly unstuck this year, unfortunately, because of the lockdown. Trinity House have not done the surveys. We've published chartlets showing where the buoys are, based on the Felixstowe Ferry Harbour Master John White doing a local survey with the aid of a sounding pole. On his advice, the buoys have been placed in new positions this year, but the chartlets on our website show the old depth contours, which can be a little confusing, but at least you know where the buoys are. And it now does seem that Trinity House aren't actually going to do a survey this year. Those chartlets really bump up our website traffic enormously. There's thousands and thousands of hits every year, especially during the early summer months when people are getting their documentation ready for cruising. The other big change in the book, in the most recent edition, is the inclusion of many new aerial photographs, and perhaps one of you can tell me on the comments where this is, because lots of people don't seem to know where it is. I don't want anyone to cheat who already knows because they live there or something. Okay. All these aerial photographs were done using a drone rather than sending a man up in an aircraft with a camera, and it's really made a big difference because those aerial photographs can be exactly what we want, perhaps taken also at exactly the time of tide that we want, and that really has to be the way forward, I think, for aerial photography in pilot books in the modern age. I ought to add some words about keeping the book up to date, and how do we do that, because I've waffled on now for 25 minutes. Well, how do we keep it up to date? Well, we go cruising, and when we go cruising on the East Coast, you're never really off watch. Always taking new photographs. We're always wandering into the marina or harbour office and asking, can you check through these details, are they all still the same, because things do change and people don't tell us. We read all the notices to mariners that are issued in the area, every harbour, every river, every authority that in this area that issues NTMs, we get to read them, and we sift through them, and we do something about the ones which are relevant to East Coast Pilot. Readers email us through our website, eastcoastpilot.com, and we do answer all emails. And by the way, when readers tell us about changes, we do double check. I hope you're not offended, but we do, because we want to make sure that it's absolutely right. And we have a few local reps based around the coast, usually to do with harbour authorities, or for instance, Nigel Harmer on the Blackwater is the river bailiff, and he's one of our contacts. And they all tell us about changes, and all this stuff goes on our website. We tell you about them in occasional newsletters, which you can sign up for through the website. And we've now got a Facebook page as well, which we started just a couple of months ago, and when I looked this morning had 230 members on it, which has astonished me. So that in a nutshell is how we do this book, how we keep it up to date. Sadly, there's just the two of us now, because Colin unfortunately passed away 3.5 years ago now. So the 5th edition was down to Garth and me only, and it's made harder work of it, but it's hard work that's good fun, and we've met so many nice people along the way. Now I'm going to look through the questions, because I'm aware that I've rambled on for a long time. Lots of people saying hello. Joe, Duncan, Lucy. Oh, Lucy's here. Lucy Wilson, boss of Imray. Oh. Stephen, Ken, Mike Robertson, Andrew, Duncan Wells, another famous sailor out there, along with various other. Oh, Lucinda Heichel, my goodness. Rod Heichel probably wrote the first pilot book that I ever read for the Ionian. She says John Goode has much to answer for. John Bartlett, who was one of John's instructors at Southern Sailing. Do you use a drone off your boat? Well, we did once. The drone that was used for this book actually belonged to Imray, and I'll own up to flying it, and I only flew it off the boat once. We were at anchor at Pagusham on the River Roach, and I was very nervous about this because it's a very expensive piece of kit, and there's lots of things you can bash into on a boat, especially a sailing boat, but we got away with it. What is your favourite creek or river on the east coast and why? From Matthew at Imray's. Oh dear, I love the Deben. I love Ramsholt on the Deben. I just think it's also pretty and it's peaceful. I really like Heybridge. I like going into Heybridge Basin and just hanging out there for a few days and going up the canal in the dinghy to get the shopping from Tesco's, and having to row most of the way back because the outboard gets clogged up with weed. I love the whole place. I love going to London. My club, Hollow Shore Cruising Club, have an annual trip to St Cat's where we stay for a week. Sadly it didn't happen this spring, but it's all great fun going up there and then having a week as a tourist in London with a very cheap hotel room to stay in. Oh, gas on here. You don't think we'll give away secrets, do you? Peter Docksard, sorry if I mispronounced. What are the challenges when sailing East Coast compared to Southwest or West Country? Safe harbours, question mark. Well, I think the challenges are the shallows, getting the tides right, being able to take shortcuts across sandbanks. West Country, I feel, has very different challenges in that it's rocks everywhere. We don't really have rocks on the East Coast. So there's some pretty hard bits of mud here and there, which I can vouch for. Having been a dinghy sailor, I'm somebody who's always tempted to take shortcuts. Dave Parry, hi, nice to hear from you. Dave Parry, lifeboatman at Whitstable and about to buy a cruising yacht, I think, that he wants to talk to me about. Mike Riches, Secretary of Hollow Shore. Do you own copyright of your pictures or does Imray claim them? Well, I gave Imray the aerial pictures because of a slightly strange law with flying drones. I know about the others really. Good question. Perhaps I'll ask them one day. Dave Alexander Watts, twin keel or single keel or lifting keel? All my boats have been bilge keelers, which I feel is kind of safer and makes me more confident taking risks in shallow waters. Although, heck, you could go aground on the edge of a gutway and end up capsized with a bilge keeler, couldn't you? Thank goodness it doesn't happen to many people, and it's not happened to me yet. I quite like the idea of lifting keels, but I'm very conscious that they have a habit of going wrong, jamming up or down or falling out altogether. But I wouldn't mind having a lifting keel boat at all. Lindsay, would you think of ring binding for your next edition? Haha. Perhaps Lucy might answer that. It has been discussed and it would in some ways be easier to use. I would hope it wouldn't fall to bits rather faster. There is a question of cost, of course, and it's a competitive market, and really down to Imray's to decide that kind of thing. Gary, is Kingsforebridge operating now? Well, that's a jolly good question. Kingsforebridge has been operating for several months on a generator of all things because the machinery in electrics is also antiquated, built in the mid-50s and never updated. Well, it is operating for commercial vessels, and officially you call them up and you find out when there's a lift for a commercial vessel and you go through with that, and officially they don't open for yachts. But somebody told me the other day that they had got through on a lift just for a yacht. So I don't know the official answer to that, I'm afraid. I've had 35 minutes, so we're getting near the end of this. We got any more questions? Nice to see so many of you on here. Somebody did ask me the other day if Garth and I sailed together to do any of this. Yes, we do occasionally. Garth sailed with me for a week or 10 days doing the 5th edition, and it's a bit strange actually. I think we're probably both control freaks really. So 2 skippers on 1 boat, you know, we get on very well. I'm making a joke of this. We get on very well on the boat. Oh, Lucy has answered. Lucy says we've had many issues with ring binding being used in damp conditions. We do ring bind some other guys, but customer feedback suggests generally people prefer softback or hardback as the pages are then stitched in. Tony Lavelle, hi Tony. Tony was my pilot up the Upper Medway for the 5th edition. ECP6 question mark. Well, give us a chance, Tony. We only published 5 last August. And Garth Cooper has just said, why do you continue to do this job? Well, it keeps me off the streets. I enjoy doing it actually, Garth, don't you? Well, I know you enjoy doing it. And he doesn't do as he's told either. One of the pleasures of working with Imray has been we've had an annual sailing day with them. It got missed last year, sadly, and I'm not sure it'll happen this year, but we've had a day usually on the Orwell or the Blackwater where we've got 2 or 3 boats, and Imray being a big gang of people down from the office. We don't necessarily get sailing at any other time, and we have a cracking day out. But we must try and do that again. Any more from anybody? Oh, I should wind this up in a moment. Oh, Gary, it's Gary again. What are your best overnight anchorages? Oh, heck. Well, actually, I love it at Hearty, which is only about 1 mile from where I keep the boat at Conya. Well, perhaps it's 2 miles. I think Pyfleet Creek is a great place. I think that Ramsholt on the Deben is a great place, as I mentioned before, and a little further up the Deben, off the rocks. I think they'd be my favourite ones, really. I'm scrolling up and down, trying to see if there's any other questions I should answer that I've missed. Okay, I think I'm going to wrap this up at this point, if I can figure out how to do that. Thank you very much everybody for listening and watching, and I'll be joining some of you listening to whoever's on next week, which may well be Garth Cooper. Thank you very much, and bye-bye.